Sanbonani, Southern Africa, young people from the Archdiocese of Pretoria. Sanbonani, Far East Rand Catholic News. And I would like to greet everyone watching this installment of our conversation with our auxiliary bishop. I'm so excited today. I'm very excited to have this conversation. So basically, the theme of today's interview with His Excellency Bishop Masilo Selemela is that we want to have an intimate conversation about the Jubilee Year, its significance in Southern Africa, and why we should partake in it. And I think he is the best person to help us clarify, to better understand how significant it is ahead of their launch on Sunday, the 29th of December. So with that said, I would like to say welcome again to this installment of the conversation. And I'm very excited as a staunch Catholic young person to be a part of this historic event. It happens every 25 years. So what a time to be alive, what a time to be a young person as well. And yes, so I would like to introduce Untate. Bishop Masilo Selemela is the auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Pretoria here in South Africa, and he is from Tzaneen. He's born in Tzaneen, and he has been a rector of St. John Vianney Seminary since 2019 until his appointment in 2022. And he has a doctorate in dogmatic theology at the Pontifical Urbaniana University in Rome. And we are sitting with legends here who will tell us and help us understand everything. So with that said, I really would love for him to take us into his journey further. And I would like to say welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Kati, and I also welcome you, and I also greet your own viewers as well. It's a privilege for me to be able to share with you this conversation this morning.
Thank you very much, Baba. So as I mentioned, the reason for this sit-down is that we want to just talk more about the Jubilee Year, its significance, and why young people should really take it seriously for their spiritual journey. And so obviously on Christmas Eve, we all saw, the world was watching, as His Holiness Pope Francis opened the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica. And then on the 26th, on the feast day of altar servers, of deacons, Saint Stephen, who is the patron of altar servers and deacons, amongst others, the Pope also opened a door in one of Italy's largest prisons, just to extend that Pilgrim of Hope theme to the prisoners there. So on the 29th, which is the Feast of the Holy Family, the Archdiocese of Pretoria, amongst other dioceses in Southern Africa, will be opening or launching the Jubilee Year. And I would like His Excellency to tell us more about it. But before that, Baba, I would like for you to please give us just a glimpse of your journey into clergy. We'd like to get to also know you. When did it all start for you? What attracted you to the life of a priesthood?
Yeah, I started a long time ago. This year I was actually celebrating my silver jubilee as a priest, which means that I was ordained a priest in 1999.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Diocese of Tzaneen, where I have, served in the past years until I was actually called to the seminary to work in formation. What really attracted me to the priesthood is not a very complicated thing. It was the example of, the missionaries that worked in my area in Tzaneen, in particular Father Jack Laffen, who was a missionary of the Sacred Heart, priest, who was very close to young people. Who gathered us. He would organize camps for us to reflect on the word, but also to reflect on our lives as young people. And he would also take us around, into the various outstations Now, the message that he always preached about was, the message of salvation, but also the message of people living together peacefully, and then also accepting to build their own relationships as founded, on the mission of Christ, who was really an example of a good human being. That really caught my attention, but then Father Lafan left. When he left, another missionary, a Celtigan, Father P.J. Fitzgerald, also from Ireland, came in, and he started actually having the Bible sharing, with us. And because he didn't speak the local language, I had to go with him into the outstations as well to be an interpreter in Sepedi. And slowly, I got to see him pray, I got to see him read, I got to hear him share, and a lot of the things that he did really touched my life. And then I decided at that time that I felt also God was calling me to the priesthood. It took me about 2 years to decide, but eventually in 1990 or 91 actually, I joined the seminary.
Wow. Whatever. And I'm also asking in the context of a young person maybe discerning, not knowing where God is wanting them to be, whether it's the vocation of priesthood or maybe even marriage life or even the single life. From you having seen the priest conduct the work that they did was a form of attraction for you to be a priest. For that young person not sure, or maybe who doesn't have a role model in a form of a priest, how can they better discern this vocation?
Vocations are discerned in many ways. God speaks to us, through many ways. Even if you look at the different characters in the Bible and then how they responded to God's call and how they were called, they were not always called in a similar way. So vocations are also circumstantial. Sometimes you have a situation whereby God wants to speak to you, but God also uses your own context, God uses your own situations to be able to have a conversation with you. So first of all, the discernment is done in prayer, because you don't really choose God in the ultimate sense of reality. It is God himself who chooses us. If you read in John chapter 15 verses 16, he says, "You did not choose me, no, I chose you." So the right place, the right context to decide on a vocation, it's always prayer. We have to pray, we have to discern, but also familiarity with the scriptures, because God speaks very often in the scriptures. Sometimes you may read the Bible and then you are struck by this verse, which begins also to move your life and then makes you to search, to try to go deeper and to develop some form of a hunger, for that which God calls you. Some people are called through the example of others, but some people are also called, through events and situations that really rises in their own hearts, the motivation, the desire, the hunger to do that which God wants. So for me personally, it began with prayer. I told you about the two priests, but there was also another sister who was involved, Sister Vianney. She also came from Ireland. She also had these moments of sharing, the moments of prayer with us. She introduced us, to the different methods of praying as well. So it is in that context that I also discovered my own call. But for you to be attracted to something like a vocation, you need to somebody to explain it to you. So when I grew up myself, we had vocation camps where we would simply be there with priests and sisters who came to share with us about their own lives and what religious meant for them and how they lived their daily lives. So as a result, we could discern, actually being familiar with the kind of life that a priest lives, what makes their day, whether they play things like sports, and whether they are normal human beings like we think, because as a young person, you don't just like to understand that you're going to live the rest of your life only praying, but what is the normal life of a priest? And it is that made us also discern. And I would say to young people today, if one is discerning a vocation, the first place, prayer, scripture, but get to know and live with people who are living in that. We have these things that are called come and see. Yeah, and which for me, I feel they should be a come and stay. Because, when you go out and you observe somebody's life, that life, religious life, priesthood, and any vocation, it's impactful. If it doesn't really impact on your own life, it means it is not lived in a way that it should. All of us are attracted by somebody who just, accepted this vocation and they live it so beautifully that it becomes attractive and meaningful. That's what the vocation for me, it's all. And then that's how we have to discern. I mean, in the Bible, you have people like Jeremiah, you have the call of Samuel who's called in the dreams, and then you have the call of the apostles where Jesus calls them and he sends them, the call of Peter, Andrew, and all the rest. If you look at their own context, they are called at a different time, with a different kind of mission and vocation. God also does that to us with human being. He doesn't just call in general. God has a mission and a purpose, for the life of a person. But it is also incumbent on us while we are young to search for our mission, because the vocation is not only to the priesthood and religious life, it is also to married life, and it is also a vocation also to a life of singlehood. In the past you had people who simply wanted to spend their own lives as virgins, and then who were single people who were consecrated and gave their life to serving God and so on. And today, more especially, because sexuality, it's something that is very, very controversial in our days. Many young people today think that sexuality is just to be exposed, used, and all those things. And whereas through our own sexuality, our own singleness, single-minded as well, and then the respect for chastity in our own lives, we can also be a great witness to others, to say, look, I have given my entire self as I am as a person to God and to serve God, and that gives me meaning and joy in my life. So it's very important today that we highlight that vocations are diverse. They are not only these ones that seems we do need vocations in the church, but as the synod obliges us, which has just been completed in Rome now, that all of us should recognize that through our baptism we are all called and sent, and therefore each one of us needs to discover their own vocation and how they can contribute meaningfully in the church according to this vocation that emanates from baptism before it grows into any other thing that comes.
That is powerful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For just simplifying it for us. And I think for me, my takeaway is definitely prayer in scripture.
Yeah.
And just not reading the Bible as a storybook, but trying to find ways and means to relate to all the protagonists in our Bible. So I also would like to know what have been the highlights and challenges of your vocation as a priest, and before we just also get into you being a bishop. So what would you say have been? It's been 25 years. We celebrated it this month in December. So what have been the highlights? How has your vocation drawn you closer to God? Because I think fundamentally God calls us to holiness through these vocations. So how has it kind of like brought you closer to God, and what have been some of the highlights and challenges?
Yeah, for me, the priesthood has been it has been a very good life of joy for me. 25 years, it's a long time, and there are highlights, in the 25 years of my priesthood. First of all, the fact that God called me, and the fact that God considered me, to be somebody he had to use as his own instrument, for the salvation of others. That for me, humbles me, because there is nothing extraordinary about me. What is extraordinary is that God called me, and then he chose to use me as his instrument. That's the first thing that really, stands out for me. But what really molded and made my own priesthood is the various kind of encounter that I have with the people. No one is a priest for himself. Yeah. And in fact, the words of the patron saint, of parish priests, St. John Mary Vianney, which have remained very close to my heart for many years, are these words when he says that, if a priest were to understand who he was, he would die. What did he mean with that? St. John Vianney meant that, among the gifts that God grants to a human being, there is never such a great gift as the priesthood. It is, beyond even ourselves who have been granted with the joy of it, battle each day to come to understand it, that God chooses a human being and gives him these graces, to be able to encounter, but to also serve as a bridge between God himself and his people. The role that God really grants only to his Son, who is the only mediator, but that the priest actually extends, the mediation, because there is no priest actually without Christ as well. So for me, this stands out for me that, God chooses me and God wants to use me as the kind of bridge, that he can use in order to encounter people. But the journey of my own vocation was also enriched by others. Many, many, many lay people who I have witnessed, who lived their lives well, who were very committed Christians, who were very prayerful people, and in many ways taught me also how to become a holy priest. Because when you are serving people who take their own faith very seriously, who are committed, to their faith, and in a very simple way put God at the center of everything that they do, that moves you as well as a priest to continue, to do a little bit more, harder and so on. I have worked myself a lot with young people. I remember some years back, I was involved with the behavior change program called Education for Life, which was actually, a program that was later actually adopted by the whole conference. It came at a time when we were really struggling with the scourge of HIV and AIDS. And then we had many young people who were losing their own lives. And then we asked ourselves, what could we do in order actually to minister to young people today, and then to also speak the message, to young people about the gift of sexuality, and then how they themselves can value, chastity by actually living a life of abstinence. because everybody at that time was, throwing condoms at young people and telling them that, no, well, if you protect yourself, you will be fine. And then we came with this message where we were basically asking, young people, what would be your life like in 20 years if you do not change, your lifestyle? And that program also impacted me, a lot, because it came to touch my own priesthood in a sense that I was also one of the young people who grew up in South Africa. And none of us, we grew up in a context where nobody actually spoke to you about sexuality. Nobody spoke to you about marriage. Nobody spoke to you about anything. We went to church, we had the sacraments, but the real life issues that molded who we are at that time were never addressed. And that also made me to grow both psychologically in the art of making choices. Because education for life was not so much about avoiding HIV and AIDS. It was actually based on the words of Deuteronomy, 30c, I put before you life and death. Choose life and you will live. It was actually a method, based on the psychological method of Gerald, Egan, which were basically saying, look at your situation, it is as kind of a sea, judge that situation and act in a different way, which leads you, to lead your life, differently. That means make a choice and then determine a way in which you were going to sustain that kind of choice that you had. And that really fulfilled me, because I got in touch with many young people who shared with me their own joys, but who also shared with me their own wounds. And many young people who were sad because if they had the opportunity to choose better, they would be alive, and then they would not be having the mental issues that they had, at the time. And what really fulfilled me in my priesthood is two things. My own devotion to the Eucharist. The Eucharist is for me, even up to today, special. If I do not celebrate the Eucharist, even in a day, even on my own, I feel there is something missing in my own life. And then the second thing is my own personal devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. I learned a lot, from Mary, her own life, but a total kind of yes to God in everything. And then I continue to do that with my devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary with the Rosary, but also trying to learn from the life of Mary. Let it be done to me according to your will. That, a vocation can never be lived, to the full unless we listen to how God wants us to live it. But the vocation is also to be very simple. Pope Francis often says that priests do not suddenly mushroom at the cathedral on the day of their ordination. And I like that, because priests are human beings. For somebody to be a priest, you also have to be a very good human being. You have to be a very good human being. You have to be an honest person. You have to be a just person. You have to be a person also who have very good human relations, who can relate with people openly, and then who can guide people, who can smile, and then who can also share with others the joy that is in your own heart. So that has been also the pillar of my own ministerial life, accompanying people, being with them, not only doing serious things, but also sometimes celebrate with people, sometimes enjoying with my own parishioners, a braai, a feast there and all those things. But what has actually characterized my own ministerial life has been the ministry of presence. The priest, if he is to be a good shepherd, the priest must be present in the life of his own people, not only at certain moments. I was a kind of pastor myself who would visit people in their own families, who knew people, by name, and then who knew where they were. I was not a kind of priest even when I was, who would be using a GPS to find my own parishioners. I was there, in their own lives. I visited families, even those that were Catholics, that were lapsed. I would visit them very often, have conversations. As a result, I had also a meaningful, priestly life because of the encounter that I had with people. I got to know people's situations, and even today, as I say to priests, be there in the life of the people, because people are good. They just have, various situations in their own lives that sometimes wound them, that sometimes challenge them. But unless we walk with them and accompany them, we will never be able to minister to them fully. The words of Mother Teresa are always standing out, when you come this. She always says that if you love people, you don't have time to judge them. So, and that's what it means to be a priest. You have to walk with people, know their own situations. Then you can be able to love them for who they are, and then to love them also in their own struggles, and weaknesses. So, which is, something that is very difficult to do. But we are called nevertheless just to love people and accompany them. They will begin to open up about their wounds, about the joys in their lives. And I believe that I have tried to do that in my priesthood, and I'm still, trying at the moment. You would know something that really settled. In 2019, I had a terrible accident that killed 2 priests that were working with me in the seminar, who were very dear to me, Father Sibusiso Zulu from the Diocese of Eshowe and Father Owen Wilcock, who were my collaborators in formation in the seminar. Yeah, that was a very dark moment also in my life, because I was really impeded myself, for a period of, a year. I was recovering, and I had sustained very critical injuries, and actually I am lucky to have survived that accident. Sad as it was, I still recognize, the power of God, that God had a plan for me in my life. He preserved me from that accident. And every day I am filled with joy and gratitude in my heart, thanking God, for giving me, another chance, to be able to live. So it was a very sad moment in my life. But also on another level, a vocation is not always smooth sailing. You have to work hard at it. As a priest, you are also a human being. You are exposed to challenges. And then some of the challenges are challenges that want to draw you away from God and from your vocation. So you need to be also a very prayerful man. You need to be courageous. You need to be very strong. But you need to know your identity as well. Because most of us actually, we slide into all sorts of temptations because basically we are, struggling with issues of identity. We want to be everything, but God is asking us to be one thing, a priest. Yeah, and it is the logic of every vocation. Yeah, it's not only for priests. Even when you are married, even if you are not married, the challenge is to know your identity. Who are you? What do you want with life? And not want to leave everything and to be everything to everyone. Yeah. only God can be all in all. And then we try to reach out to people, but also one has to have a sense in the priesthood of boundaries. Yeah, if you have no boundaries, you end up also being the kind of priest who is also who falls into all sorts of situations that needs to be rescued all the time. Because remember, your temptations do not, as a priest, do not come from somewhere else. They are within the, the circle, of the people where you minister to. And therefore, prayer gives you also one of the gifts of discernment, that you can discern situations. You can be able to read that, no, here I will not survive. And then you can also quietly make your own. Yeah, but not that you are living your life by somebody who runs away from situations. You must also be a man of courage who can also be able to speak, the power of God to situations and challenge them also to transform. Sometimes you need to confront people who are a threat to your ministry, so that you transform them also into prayer warriors, that they can begin to understand you differently, pray for you, and walk with you in your priesthood. Because your identity tells them this is who you are. They know who you are, and then they are forced themselves not to draw you away, but to also accompany you towards God.
I think for me, one of my favorite characters in the Bible is Jesus himself.
Yeah.
Because as you talk about these certain elements, like you can really also see the human side of God, Jesus. And when you're talking about temptations, he also faced them, especially while he was fasting. And I believe everyone, especially priests, I think Jesus is a very great role model to look up to. Father, I also would like just to talk about, as the auxiliary bishop of one of South Africa's capital city.
Yeah.
How has it been? And I would like for you to please tie it in with your formation. You used to be a formator at St. John Vianney here in Pretoria in South Africa.
Yeah.
So how has that helped you now help shepherd the parishioners in Pretoria? How has that journey been for you?
Well, it has been a good journey so far. I'm not a bishop for a long time. You would realize that I'm now, 2 years a bishop, and so on. Yeah, what helps me actually to shepherd, the Archdiocese and to work with the Archbishop in terms of providing leadership, to priests, religious and laity in this Archdiocese, is basically also my long-standing work in formation. I was sent to, Rome, where I studied for 5 years up until the time when I completed my doctorate, in dogmatic theology, and did a little bit of studies also in canon law, which really empowered me, to be able to understand who are the priests. In formation, first of all, you seek to help many young people to discover that they are disciples, first of all, because none of us can ever really become a priest unless we are disciples of Jesus. So I spent many years in the seminary myself, trying from my own discipleship, which you will discover is also my motto, called to discipleship, that each day we seek to mold our lives to become followers, of Jesus. Somebody said, if you are not a follower of Jesus, you should not be surprised if others are not following you. People follow us because we are followers of Jesus. And that's what I did mostly in the seminary, trying to help many of the young people who were called to the priesthood to discover their own discipleship, so that through this discipleship they may also discover the ministry of priests. So when I became bishop, auxiliary bishop in Pretoria, that became very easy for me, because most of the young priests that have come here were trained at my own, formation time in the seminary that spanned up to about 12 years there. So many of them knew what my vision of the priesthood is and what God wants. So I don't really have to follow them behind, because they know what it means, to be a priest. But it has been good, 2 years, because also working with Archbishop Dabula, who has been also a bishop in 2 different contexts. He has a lot of experience, around him. He was also a seminary rector. We are able to sit together, share, and then be able to plan together. What makes life easier in the Archdiocese of Pretoria is that in this Archdiocese, you are not just trying to search for things that you're going to do when you wake up in the morning. There is a pastoral plan, which was the fruit of the synodal process that happened in this Archdiocese even before this Holy Father called the Synod in Rome. We had already finished the Synod here, and then a pastoral plan actually developed out of that, which is really more or less modeled also on the pastoral plan of the South African Catholic Bishops' Conference, which basically has, community serving humanity and all of creation. And we sought to kind of create, the pastoral plan into commissions, in the Archdiocese that would help us to minister better, to people. You have commission for youth, which you are interested in it, which makes us to be able to reach out to young people, and then to be able to develop a proper ministerial approach to youth issues. In the Archdiocese, we have the commission, for catechetics, which actually looks at the whole thing of how do we prepare people adequately and properly, for the faith formation, and how do we keep on reflecting on the things that we should do, in order to help people to really live their own full, their faith fully according to the stages. You have a commission for, marriage and family life, where we actually also through that minister to the married couples, the young couples, elderly couples, widows and widowers, single, those who are contemplating marriage in terms of marriage encounter. You have justice and peace and the care of creation, and non-violence, where we also address issues of human development, like justice, the care of creation, climate change and all those things. We do that through that. We have the commission for Caritas, where we look, after the poor and so on. The commission, for evangelization, where we make sure that, the pastoral plan is fully implemented and lived, by the people. And then we also have other committees that would become commissions, now, ecumenism and religious dialogue. We have the commission, for liturgy and music, and then we also have commission for vocation. So all in all, we got an overall plan. With these commissions, have got leaders where we actually meet with them, and then we also deliberate, and we share with them the vision as to how we need to minister and to keep, the Archdiocese alive. The other one is the commission for finance and fundraising and all those. So it is easier to work because there is a plan. Yeah, so far it has been good also working with people I do have generally a good relationship with the priest here and the religious, and we are working very well together. But my many years in formation, the priesthood have helped me to also understand people, understand relationships, and understand how it is that you deal with the different kind of personalities as well. Because priests are also not the same. You have those ones that are excellent, who do things well. You are others who need a nudge. You have others who also, if let me put it in this way, three kind of people, those that make things happen, and those that watch things happening, and then those that don't know what is happening. So leadership is exercised in that context. So in a sense, even leading people, it becomes like that. Some, they are going to make things happen. Some, they would be watching, they need a bit of a nudge. And then there are others that really don't know what is happening. Then they need a push to be there, because as a bishop, you are not only leading people who are excellent and qualified, you are also leading people who may not have the necessary initiative, the necessary capability, the necessary skill sometimes. But all of them are your children. You are like a father in the family. You have to look after those that are doing well and those that need to be carried along. So as a bishop, I have learned, like in the seminary when I was formator there and ultimately rector, I learned to lead in these ways, which is described fully now by Pope Francis actually in his document, The Joy of the Gospel. He says that a leader must be able to lead from the front, sometimes might be able to know when he needs to lead from the middle, and sometimes he also needs to be conscious when he needs to learn from the back. So this has been, my way of doing things. In certain movements, I am happy to stay at the back. Sometimes I have to be in the middle, and sometimes I have been also in the front in situations where I see that here people do need to be, drawn to some form of a direction. But in some places, all in the whole, in the Archdiocese, there is a lot of work to do, but all in all, a lot of many parishes and priests are doing their best, and we have, some of the most excellent priests in this Archdiocese. So that was also works well for us, yeah.
That's amazing. And then I would like us to please jump into the Jubilee Year. Your Excellency, I just want to ask in terms of what the Jubilee Year means in the Southern African context, especially for young people. What should it mean? And the previous one, the Pope, the late Pope John Paul II opened the Holy Door in the year 2000.
Yes.
25 years later, as we saw on Christmas Eve, it happened. So what should it mean for the Southern African community?
Yeah, the Jubilee, first of all, it's an event of the church, and then from being an event of the church, it touches the various groups that are there in the church, the youth and so on, families, individual persons, parishes. You would recall that in the biblical sense, jubilees used to be held, every 50 years originally. And then the main aim of that was actually restoration. At that time, people who were deprived, of land because they had debts, this land was restored to them. And then debts were cancelled. And people who had many sins that really deprived them, from being part of the community for a long time, experience, cancellation of their sins, their own forgiveness of their own sins. and then they were somehow restored, to kind of harmonious relationships. They came back, and they were, if you were to use these words, they were given their own dignity. People whose dignity was, stripped, those who were slaves then were returned, and then they got their own lives back. So the Jubilee is really a time, of coming back to God. And especially for young people today, the Jubilee is that moment where, as a young person, I have to begin to examine myself and to say to myself, I have this opportunity to come back to God. What are the things in my own life that had previously drawn me far away from God, and that made me, to avoid God? Because let's face the truth, many of us, once we neglect the faith, once we neglect our own spiritual life, very often God does not necessarily become an enemy, but God becomes somebody we avoid, somebody whose face we do not want to look at. So the Jubilee is really a time of restoration, a time of coming back to myself, this time of really, examining my own faith path, the time of also realizing and discovering that first of all, God loves me as I am, and then He draws me to Himself, and I should seek more and more to use this opportunity, to welcome the hope that God gives to us. I mean, you remember the theme of the Jubilee is the pilgrims of hope. It is actually basically drawn from Romans 5:5. Hope does not disappoint. What the Holy Father is trying to do with this Jubilee is also to say to us, look, you have an opportunity, as a young person today, to discover your talents and to discover your gifts, but also to know that you can be able to, use this one for the benefit, of others. But you can also be somebody who discovers hope in your own life when it is lost. Many of our young people have different situations today. Many young people do not have work. As you know, the percentage of youth that are unemployed in our country is very high. Now, it is also an opportunity during the Jubilee to discover, as young people, how we can contribute, to young people today to discover the gifts within themselves, and how young people can also unite, and engage in projects as well that will try to uplift the young person today. Many of the young people are also, because of lack of work and all those things, many young people suffer a lot of mental issues as well. Mental health is an issue. Many young people escape the challenges of life through addiction and drugs. It is a time also to proclaim hope to youth in those situations. As young people, what can we do ourselves, to go into situations where we can gather young people, where to say to young people, addiction is not the only way to cope, that you are still special, God loves you, you are unique, and then you can still do more by actually reaching out to young people today. I would like myself to see many of the young people today in Southern Africa also having serious campaign during the Jubilee to kind of, reach out to youth and young people who are in various situations, and also even dealing with mental issues. Many young people are depressed. How can we actually reach out to them and then, accompany them, walk with them, and say to them, the world does not care, but we care. We are there. we will be with you. We would walk with you. We might not be able to give you a job, but we might work with you to find something that you can do that may be able to give you hope. So for me, this is what the Jubilee is. But it begins first of all with the spiritual self. Discovering the love of God, it's actually going back to God and knowing that when we, go back, first of all, also just going back to confess our sins. Yeah, because sometimes when we don't go to confession, we become very obstinate in sin. And we want to continue doing the same things all over again and saying, but uNkulunkulu uyasazi. And then we become too familiar with God. So we need to be open. The first thing is just go back to God, confess one's sins. And secondly, because when we confess during the Jubilee year, we confess our own sins, we can say that prayer of the Our Father and the Hail Mary, and the Creed to gain an indulgence, which is also that the residues of sins committed, which are still having an impact in our own lives, can be forgiven, and then we can be restored, to full spiritual life, and then we can begin to walk with God again, even in whatever situation that had alienated us from God, and others. The last thing for me, the Jubilee calls us also to fix our own relationships. Many young people, through their own wounds, come from families where relationships are no longer, good. You do certain things and then relationships are no longer good it is also a time to go back, to reconcile with families, fix relationships, and walk better, with our own parents, with those that we live by. For me, as I said, you can never be a spiritual person unless you are a good human being. We also have to fix human relationships. Yeah, it's a time also to say to others, I am sorry, which is also a very difficult thing, for all of us to be able to say. Most of us, we would rather be quiet than say sorry to someone. It is an opportunity also to mend relationships.
And Father, Baba.
No, don't worry. You can call me Father. Yes.
Yes. I just also wanted to know in terms of the significance behind the holy door. Asking for that person who's like, yeah, okay, hope does not kill. The significance behind the Pope opening the holy door, and then when we're now going to localize it and bring it closer home, as you will be launching it on Sunday the 29th. So can you please tell us the significance behind why did he have to open that particular door, and how as bishops in various dioceses you'll be launching that? So what is the significance behind this whole launch?
Yeah, the whole issue of the Holy Door happens only in Rome. It's not going to, happen in the local cathedrals, because the Jubilee Year is inaugurated in Rome, which is, the seat of the Universal Church. And actually in Rome, there are 4 basilicas, that have been identified. You're going to have, St. Peter's. You're going to have the Lateran, the Basilica of St. Paul outside of the hall. And then the Pope also yesterday was at this, prison where he had also opened the door of the whole Jubilee year. What does the door symbolize? The door symbolizes Christ himself. In the Gospel of John, Christ himself says, I am the door. No one can come to the Father except through me. So the door symbolically represents Jesus Christ, who opens to us, that door to encounter God and to have a relationship with God, and then also to come home to the Father. But we can't come to the Father unless we actually go through Christ. So Christ becomes that door that opens us ultimately, to the Father. And that's why the Holy Father opens the door, because traditionally the first Jubilees, which was actually, proclaimed in Rome, um, I think it must have been around the 1300s. So, which is basically to say that this is, the seat of the universal church. The doors are opened there because the pilgrims are actually going to Rome. They are going to pass through that holy door, like you will be going with the youth. You're going to pass through that holy door, and then you would have also, the opportunity to have your own confessions there, and then to say the prayer and gain an indulgence as you go through the holy door. But the holy door will not be opened in the local churches. Like if we, on the 29th when we launch, we will not be, opening the holy door, because the Holy Father has done that for the universal church. What we would be doing locally would be launching, but also giving a direction as to how individuals can be able to live the Jubilee, how deaneries can be able to live the Jubilee, and then how parishes can be able to live the Jubilee. And then the Holy Father has asked all the bishops to write a pastoral letter, giving indications to his faithful in his own diocese how they might participate, in the Jubilee. Now, in the Archdiocese here, we would launch. The Archbishop will read his pastoral letter, which would have the contents of how the people in the Archdiocese are going to live the Jubilee, in terms of parishes, deaneries, and also on an individual, basis. And therefore, people will be given candles, and then they themselves in their own parishes will then have to decide how they are going to, live this. For an example, how as individuals do I live, in my family, the theme, of hope? What are the activities that I can do on an individual basis? But at the parish, as a commission, like the youth would be doing, as sodalities like the St. Anne, and then other sodalities will be doing, how do we live this? If there are to be confessions to be done in the parish, what would happen? How is the parish going to organize itself for a Jubilee? Like, for instance, the parish can have perpetual adoration, and then at the same time to have a priest available at a particular time, to have confession like they do in Rome, where confessions are actually there 24/7. You can go into the basilica. The first thing you go for confession. Then there are these prayers of indulgence that are put in there. You do those prayers and you walk through the holy door. Now, on a local level, the South African Catholic Bishops' Conference has also issued prayers and tools to help individuals, parishes, by marking certain moments, through certain prayers in parishes, in the families, and so on. And that's how we are going to live the Jubilee in the Southern Africa. Yeah.
And then, in the context of young people, how can they be pilgrims of hope in terms of the activities? As you mentioned, His Grace Archbishop Mpago will be reading his pastoral letter.
Yeah.
What are some of the activities that you have planned as a diocese?
Our own youth commission here they have a series of activities that they have planned, to live the Jubilee Year, which they have presented, at the conference for priests, in December this year. One of those activities would be that they would be having a cross which will be blessed, and this cross would be moving, in the different deaneries, and then it is accompanied with, prayers, where young people would have, these prayers. They have also activities planned for youth, like their annual youth day, where they will plan to actually allow young people to have an opportunity to confess, and then also to be able to do their Jubilee prayer. And that is one, but the main one is really the cross. And then secondly, they would be taking young people now to the actual Jubilee itself in Rome next year, and then up to so far they have recorded about 34 young people. There may be more now at the time when they were given, who would actually be undertaking the pilgrimage to Rome as youth, to leave the pilgrimage. But they have a whole timetable themselves of activities for the Jubilee Year next year for the youth, which they would have. But they would have the main event, that's the cross, and then their own event, which happens around June 16, which is actually a whole diocesan event where young people will come together. And again, this would be lived in the context of the theme of the Jubilee of Hope, because at that time the cross would have circulated to the different kind of a thing, and then they would have this main event also to leave the Jubilee, like we would do ourselves when we launch on the 29th. People will be given the candle to go into their own deaneries and parishes to leave the Jubilee according to the theme and activities decided by them at the local level. Then we would have in June also a whole Archdiocesan celebration, where we will have the Jubilee celebration, where we would also give people a practical experience also of having confessions, and then also having the prayers of indulgence, and concluding with the mass celebrated by the Archbishop, and then with myself there, so that as the Archdiocese we are united, and then we continue to live the Jubilee in a particular emphatic way in different parts of the Archdiocese.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So just on Sunday, just to maybe advise or give people tips as to what's going to happen, like I do understand, because I do follow your Facebook page a lot, so I do follow what's going to happen, but especially for those who are not aware, it's not for everyone, right? It's certain representatives. So
Yeah,
on Sunday,
it's
what's going to happen on the 29th being launched?
Yeah, it's not for everyone. The representatives of the parishes will come, because we have a structure where we have deanery councils. So we would have the representatives that will come from the deaneries, which is actually a deanery is made out of a group of parishes of that area. So they would be representing the parishes in that area. So they would come to the cathedral. The first thing that we would do would be the beginning of the Mass, and at the beginning of the Mass, the pastoral letter of the Archbishop will be read aloud. And then the pastoral letter will explain the program, of the Jubilee for this year. And then what is the Jubilee, and then what is its meaning for our own, Archdiocese, and then what the Archbishop is asking people to do, during the Jubilee year. It's not going to be a long thing. It's a letter. It's just simply telling them, in the individually, how can you leave the theme, and then as a parish, and also as the deanery parish, and then as the Archdiocese. Then that would be outlined in the pastoral letter, And then afterwards, the Mass will be celebrated by the Archbishop, and then I'll give the homily, of the Jubilee. And then we will then light the Jubilee candle, and then it will be given to the various representatives of the demon. And then they will then be dismissed to go back now into their own parishes, now that we have launched to begin the Jubilee in their respective deaneries and parishes.
Okay. And then just to wrap up this conversation, Your Excellency, I just would like for you to please sum it up for us. So how in Southern Africa, considering the social issues we face, because we do live outside the church as well, so we do obviously face things like your violence, abuse, mental health issues, which we touched on, unemployment. So as a Catholic, how should I live how should I extend hope to my neighbors who are not necessarily Catholics? So how should I be a pilgrim of hope, not only as a young person, but as a Catholic? And for Catholics as well, who are going through the most, that really need the restoration of their hope, can you please maybe also advise them or give them a message of hope? So my question is, how can we as the church in Southern Africa be pilgrims of hope practically? And for those who have lost hope, can you please help restore it through your message of hope?
Yeah, we have to restore people's hope, not only by just only giving a message and of hope, but we also have to live in solidarity with people. Some of the things I have already indicated, the Holy Father through the Synod has also said that there is no Synod without ecumenism. That means we also have to reach out in solidarity to other churches, also, to work with them. And some of the activities we are already, doing, like we are doing in the Archdiocese of Pretoria now. We are currently engaged with a program which is for men. It's called Fathers Matter. It's not a Catholic program, it's an ecumenical program that has been developed by Heartlines to actually help young people, to help men, actually in particular, to restore relations with children that they have fathered, that they have otherwise not been present into their own lives. We are also running this program as we speak now in the Archdiocese to kind of help, fathers to restore relationships that they have, with their children that they have fathered and sometimes neglected and that were not present. And that's still also, providing hope, to young people. The other thing that we are doing, also through the Justice and Peace, it's also to help and conscientize people, about issues around gender-based violence and then respect for the dignity of the person. But we are also engaged now with issues of, cleaning of the environment as well. There's a lot of litter and all, and through the Laudato Si program, we are also reaching out to that. But also this year, we are addressing more and more issues of climate change, because if we do not change our behavior, we are actually going to be disadvantaged a lot. Like, for instance, how do we care for creation? Do we throw things around? Pollution, water cleanliness, because we are having more and more scarcity, of water. Looking after trees, do we really cut them more and all those? The braai, tradition, how do we also reduce emissions and all those? So these are some of the things that we are doing, in order to actually, to live in solidarity with others, but also to conscientize us that it is our common responsibility as Christians, as human beings, to keep our common home, friendly, so that the earth becomes our mother that also looks after us, so that, we are not disadvantaged because of the abuse says ourselves that we subject to the whole of creation. So there is a lot that we need to be doing, to actual supporting, people. The others I have mentioned when I spoke about, the various, kind of addictions that, people are. But we need to care more and more for our own creation. But the other thing we need to, there is an issue in our country, of migration and refugees. We need to better, take care also of, people who have actually gone out of their own countries, flying situations of war, deprivation, and the others. We also need to do that. We know that currently in Mozambique there is turmoil there, and then we've got to be also prepared now that we will, be hosting people and then be, donating generously in order to keep, people who are flying away from the turmoil and the unrest in Mozambique. Some of them are already in Swaziland, and then we are already trying to see, as the conference, how we can reach out to the Bishop of Manzini to see how we can contribute also as Catholics, towards taking care of those who are, housed into our own countries because they are flying from different situations that threaten their life.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. So we were just talking about practical ways of being pilgrims of hope. Those that don't have hope, what do you say to them?
Well, I will just simply use the words, of Romans 5:5. Hope does not disappoint. It's very simple. Those that do not have hope, let us reach out to them. Practically speaking, just identify as a person from a human heart that cares and loves what it is that I can do as a person to give another hope. Yeah, all of us have to do it. Just identify a person, give that person a hope. Because it's about accompanying people on the journey of life. It's not just only saying to them, have hope. But what am I going to do on an individual person to uplift somebody's life?
Thank you very much for gracing us with your time.
You're welcome.
I had a very great, insightful conversation with you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, yeah.
And yes, so Pilgrims of Hope. So the Jubilee Year has officially begun. His Holiness Pope Francis has opened the Holy Door in Rome, and there will be various other basilicas. On the 29th, he'll be opening at his seat at St. John Lateran on the 29th, and then on the 1st, during the solemnity of our Mother Mary on the 1st, he'll be opening it at St. Mary Major, and then on the 5th of January, he'll be opening it at St. Paul outside the walls. So yes, he'll be a very, very busy man, our Holy Father, next year, accompanying us, billions of Catholics around the world. But here in Southern Africa, you did hear Bishop Masilo telling us about the various activities they'll be doing in this particular archdiocese. And to all the other dioceses in Southern Africa, really, let's keep the hope alive and let's help our fellow brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for tuning in.